So when you were in Wisconsin, were you in more of like a rural area there, or was it a town, a city?
Both.
Okay. So did
um
you deal with septics and like things like that?
for sure. Do you do a lot of that, right?
I'd say like probably 60 to 70%. I mean, unless I sell something right in town, but 60 to 70% of my sales or my listings have a septic of some kind. So
Wow.
that's a horrid deal. Yeah. Um, so I don't know, is that as, I mean, I suppose you run into that much in the cities?
Yeah, so actually my very first Minnesota transaction was well and septic, and I was surprised. I was like, oh, I mean, you don't see a lot of that here, but when you're out selling in the suburbs, you see a little bit more. But yeah, I would say one in every four transactions in Wisconsin was well and septic.
And, you know, just kind of talking to home buyers and everything like that's really something to like it can be a huge hindrance to a deal, and a huge hindrance for like
Mhm.
anybody for the home buyer process because you're trying to get this deal done and you're trying to buy your home. And if you're looking for like an FHA or a VA loan, unless something's changed that I'm unaware, I mean, you have to have that compliant. And so we have like old farmhouses, that were built in 1952 up here. It'll have beautiful land or beautiful, nice old house, and then the septic isn't compliant, and that's, you know, in Minnesota, it's a nightmare because you have to dig it up, and this happens all year long, and we only have what 2.5 weeks where we don't have snow. It's a frustration as a real estate agent, a frustration as a home buyer, where they just want to buy a home and all these septics are compliant, work, just fine, but they don't have that certificate of, the certificate of compliance. And oh,
Few years. Well, there are a lot of differences between Wisconsin and Minnesota real estate.
okay. What do you think
Yeah.
are the biggest?
When I have friends right now who want advice about Wisconsin real estate, I'm able to answer like the basic questions for them, but usually I just quickly give them off to somebody in Wisconsin because there are such huge differences and it's easy to forget what I've learned now and
Mhm.
am used to now, what it used to be like. The biggest thing that I've noticed is the appraisal contingency. It's just automatic in the Minnesota transaction in
Yeah.
the purchase agreement. It's just a contingency that you have. So in Wisconsin, you have the option of putting it in. So you
Oh,
could do a contract with zero appraisal contingency, which is crazy to me for anybody who has financing.
wow.
Isn't
I
that weird?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that'd be like. I mean, I suppose in a competitive situation.
It's weird. And then another thing is the inspection contingency is not set up the same as it is there. So when you have your inspection contingency in Wisconsin, it's not assumed that you can get out at any point before it's over for almost any reason. It has to be inspection related if you're going to get out. And even then, they sometimes can still keep your earnest money.
Wow. So it sounds like almost like I don't know, that's a pretty bold statement for me to say, but it sounds like the buyers might be a little bit more protected in Minnesota. Is that
Yes,
okay?
that is bold and accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. Um, so I'm curious about your market where you are. Do you have to get as competitive as we do? Because right now I have several buyers that they're losing out in 10 to 20 offer situations. There's so many on the table.
Um, that's a good question. I would say that we don't get 10 to 20. I'd say that we like get somewhere from 5 to 8. If it was like a right now, if you are, kind of middle, I don't know what middle class like would be considered like in the cities for the market. That's why I rely on people like you to help me with that, and hand my leads off because. And that's the thing too is for anybody, I think that if your real estate agent isn't in your market, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing at all for them to hand them off to somebody that they trust because so for example, I don't know what you'd be like middle class, but probably between like 150 to 250 to 280K is like our middle class.
Oh,
Like
sure.
if you put that on the market right now, you're, I mean, it's gonna, you could just hold a sign out there. You don't, might as well not even put it in the
Oh,
ground.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we also have no inventory up here. I don't know about you. Like, when I'm not even kidding. Like, if I were to show you our statistics of like our county right now, it'd probably be like alarming to you. Like, we're talking like maybe 1 to 2 new listings every 3 days. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so we have buyers lined up right now, and people, I don't know if it's, COVID or what it is, but people are just, with winter too, people just don't want to list their house. So
People can't get into houses.
what's that?
I said people can't even get into houses at that rate.
Right, right. So it's kind of a, so our market is, I would say it's not as competitive as yours, at all, but it's definitely like a situation where if it's the right house, it can be. That being said, though, I mean, yeah, it's, if people are afraid of those competitive situations, that it is a nice area where, right now it's, you could buy a house right now and it wouldn't be competitive. There isn't much on the market, but if you found the one that you did, it wouldn't be, you'd get a little bit more, it'd be a little bit easier to talk with just one-on-one rather than having 3 or 4 offers. So
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of the Wisconsin market, and I don't know if it's changed since I was there last year, but
mhm,
yeah, it was like you were in an offer situation with maybe 5 to 10 offers, and the average home sale price was 180.
mhm. And it
So it
really
was,
just yeah, it really just depends.
yeah,
Like if you we have, I don't know if you're familiar, but we have like Lake Pokegama up here, and that a whole area will will just, I mean, if you get something if you price it right, and that's kind of where it's like up to the real estate agent too, is right now with the market and everything like that. Like if it's priced right, it'll sell.
oh, absolutely.
What about sellers in your area? Do you notice anything different about Wisconsin sellers versus Minnesota sellers? I don't know are they more protected here, more protected in Wisconsin?
No, I think everything is a little bit clearer here. It's all written out clear in the contract for seller. Here's what we expect of you, buyer. Here's what we expect of you. And I mean that as far as the inspection contingency. Sellers here understand that buyers can get out based on the inspection contingency. And I don't know. I haven't seen a huge difference otherwise as far as sellers. I think right now in this market, it's just crazy.
Mhm.
Sellers know how they can get, and they're not really willing to budge as far as covering closing costs, and they're usually receiving some form of additional provision in the contract stating that they're not going to be asked of anything from the inspection contingency, or that buyers are going to bring an extra $5,000 to closing if the appraisal doesn't come through. Right now is an ideal time to be a seller because buyers need to get into houses, and sellers, there's not very many of them right now.
Mhm. What about cost of living compared to Wisconsin? Like, I guess you would know that better than anybody. I mean, what's the cost of living from where you were at to the cities?
The biggest shock factor for me was the house market, just
Mhm.
because when we moved here, we were all right out the gate ready to buy a house because we were about to buy one in Wisconsin. So we were like, oh, let's see, 180 could get us this little ranch. It's a decent house. It's fairly updated. This is great in Wisconsin. And then we come here and we spoke with a really good friend of mine, Sierra, who's ended up selling us our house here. And she's like, you're gonna have to go higher than 180. You can't get much here for 180. You can get a little shack.
Yeah,
So we ended up having to go and get pre-approved, and not pre-approved. We officially got pre-approved. He's like, yeah, you can go up to this number, and we were able to get a beautiful house, but you had to go a little bit further out in the suburbs with that.
yeah.
So the first time homebuyer price range here is pretty much a minimum of 200, 210, and first
Wow.
time home go up to 350, which in Wisconsin, 350 gets you like the area of Wisconsin I was in, it gets you a beautiful modern home that I remember having a client in the $300,000 price range there. And I was like, oh, these houses are amazing. I hope to live in one someday. And
Yeah.
now that's first time home buyers are price wise here. It was just a huge shock for me.